Hey Reddit, I'm not even sure where to start. I'm not the type to post on here. Honestly, I'm more of a lurker. But what happened to me? It's the kind of thing you can't keep bottled up without feeling like you're gonna explode. So here I am, typing this at 3 a.m., hopped up on caffeine while glancing over my shoulder every 10 seconds. It started last month. You know, when you're bored out of your mind and you do something dumb for the hell of it? Yeah, that was me. I'd been laid off from my job, and with nothing to do all day, I was spending way too much time online. YouTube, TikTok, Reddit, you name it, I was there. And like any wannabe internet explorer, I eventually stumbled onto videos about the dark web. You know the ones I'm talking about? Animated horror stories with creepy voiceovers, thumbnails of anonymous figures in hoodies, and titles like, "I bought a box off the dark web and regretted it." I used to laugh at them. I mean, they're entertaining, but clearly fake, right? Well, spoiler alert, they're not as fake as I thought. It all started when one of those videos mentioned mystery links you can find on forums. It's kind of like internet Russian roulette. You click the link, and it could be anything. Just a blank page, some creepy art, or, if you're unlucky, something worse. I didn't think it was real, but I figured, why not see for myself? Stupid idea, I know. So I downloaded Tor because apparently that's step one of doing dumb stuff on the internet. I followed the breadcrumbs from Reddit to some shady forums. Most of the links were dead ends, but then I found one labeled "For the Curious and the Brave." Classic clickbait, right? It led to a page with a single sentence. How far will you go to find the truth? Below it was another link. And because I'm an idiot, I clicked it. The page that loaded was unsettling. It had this weird, glitchy vibe, like a hacked website from the early 2000s. The background was black, with white text scrolling across the screen. At first, it looked like gibberish, random strings of numbers and letters, but then I noticed something strange. Hidden in the mess was an actual sentence, "Download to continue." Now, anyone with half a brain would have backed out right there. But I wasn't exactly thinking straight. Maybe it was boredom, maybe it was ego, I don't know. I clicked download. What downloaded wasn't a file, but a text document. It was titled coordinates.txt, and when I opened it, there they were, latitude and longitude. I copy-pasted them into Google Maps, expecting them to lead to the middle of nowhere. But no, they led to an actual place, an industrial district on the outskirts of my city, about a 40-minute drive from where I live. I stared at the screen for a long time, debating whether I should go. A big part of me was like, this is a terrible idea, but the other part, the one that had been stuck inside for weeks, bored out of its skull, that part was screaming, just do it. So I grabbed my car keys and left. The drive there was uneventful, but as I got closer, the vibe started to change. You know when you're driving somewhere and suddenly it feels like you've entered a different world? That's what it was like. The streets got darker, quieter. Streetlights were few and far between, and the ones that were there flickered like something out of a horror movie. My GPS guided me to a long, empty road lined with warehouses. Most of them were run down with broken windows and graffiti. It was the kind of place where you wouldn't be surprised to find something bad. I parked outside the building the coordinates led to. It looked abandoned like the rest of them. The windows were boarded up, and the metal door was rusted and dented. But here's the weird part. There was a light coming from inside. Faint, but definitely there. My heart was pounding. I sat in my car for what felt like forever, staring at the building and trying to convince myself to leave. But then, out of nowhere, I got a text. At first, I thought it was just spam or something, but when I checked my phone, my stomach dropped. The text was from an unknown number, and it only said 3 words. You're almost there. At that point, Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to drive away. But, like an idiot, I got out of the car and walked toward the warehouse. The door wasn't locked. I pushed it open, and the first thing that hit me was the smell. It was this awful metallic stench, like rust and something rotting. The inside was pitch black, except for a single bulb hanging from the ceiling, swinging slightly, casting long, shifting shadows. And in the middle of the room, there was something chained to the floor. I couldn't see it clearly. It was just this dark, hunched shape, but I could hear it breathing. Heavy, raspy breaths, like it was struggling for air. I took a step closer, and that's when it moved. It wasn't human. Okay, so I didn't think I'd be back this quickly, but I can't stop thinking about it. My brain feels like it's stuck in some kind of loop, replaying everything over and over again. I left you at the part where I saw it. And no, I'm not here to hype this up or exaggerate. I swear on everything. What I saw in that warehouse was beyond anything I've ever experienced. Let me backtrack a bit. When I first walked into that place, I wasn't even sure what I was expecting. Maybe some old machinery or squatters. At most, I thought I'd find a group of edgy teenagers trying to scare people with fake, dark web experiments. But no, it was dead quiet except for that breathing, heavy, wet, like someone gasping for air through a clogged straw. I can't even describe it properly, but I'll tell you this, it wasn't human. It didn't have that natural rhythm, you know, like when a person or an animal breathes. This was uneven, irregular, almost like it was trying to mimic breathing, but didn't quite know how to do it right. The light above it, barely brighter than a candle, swayed with this slow, hypnotic rhythm. Every time the light swung, the shadows stretched across the walls, making the thing chained to the floor seem even bigger. I don't know why, but I pulled out my phone. I thought about using the flashlight, but then something in the back of my mind screamed at me not to. It was like this primal instinct was saying, "Don't make it see you." I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, just listening to it breathe. My legs felt like jelly, but I forced myself to take a step closer. My shoes crunched on some broken glass, and the sound felt deafening in the silence. That's when it reacted. It turned its head toward me, or at least I think it was its head. The movement was so quick, so unnatural that it made my skin crawl. For a split second, the light swung just enough to catch its shape. Its body was hunched and twisted, like it had been broken and put back together wrong. Its arms, or what I think were its arms, were too long, and the skin looked pale and stretched thin, almost translucent. But the worst part, the face, if you can even call it that. There were no eyes, just two deep, empty pits. And the mouth, it was open, wide enough to make my stomach churn, with teeth that didn't belong to any living thing. I didn't scream. I wanted to, but the sound caught in my throat. Instead, I stumbled back, tripping over something on the floor, a chain, I think, and landed hard on my back. My phone slipped out of my hand and clattered across the concrete. For a second, I thought I was done for. I thought whatever it was would lunge at me, but it didn't. It just tilted its head like it was confused, like it was trying to figure out what I was. Then out of nowhere, a sound broke the tension, a loud ping, like a notification. It was my phone. And yes, I know how ridiculous this sounds, but that single sound almost made me pee myself. I scrambled to grab it, and when I saw the screen, my blood ran cold. Another text, same unknown number. This time it said, "Do not move." You ever get that kind of fear where your whole body just locks up? Like, even though you know you should run, you physically can't? That's where I was. The thing in front of me let out this low, guttural growl. It wasn't loud, but it vibrated through the air in a way that made my chest tighten. It shifted slightly, pulling against the chains, and I realized something that made my heart race even more. The chains were straining. I don't know why I thought they'd be strong enough to hold it, but the way they creaked and groaned made it clear that whatever had put it here hadn't planned for someone like me to show up. And then I saw it. A thick metal collar around its neck, bolted to the floor with chains that looked industrial grade. There were symbols etched into the collar, but I couldn't make them out in the dim light. I didn't move, I didn't breathe, I just sat there, staring at this thing, waiting for it to decide whether I was prey or just another shadow in the room. And then I heard it. A sound that was somehow worse than anything else I'd experienced that night. Footsteps, not mine, not the thing's. Someone or something was walking toward the warehouse. The sound was slow, deliberate, like whoever it was wanted me to hear them coming. The metal door creaked open slightly, just enough for a sliver of moonlight to spill in. I turned my head, and standing in the doorway was a silhouette. It wasn't holding a flashlight or a weapon or anything like that. It just stood there, motionless, watching. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look, but my curiosity got the better of me. The text said, "You shouldn't have come here." No kidding. The figure in the doorway stepped inside, and as it did, the thing in the chains started thrashing. Not violently, but enough to make the whole room feel like it was vibrating. The footsteps got closer, and I realized something terrifying. The thing in the chains wasn't afraid of me, but it was afraid of whoever just walked in. I don't remember much after that. My fight or flight kicked in, and all I could think about was getting the hell out of there. I grabbed my phone, scrambled to my feet, and bolted toward the door. I don't even know how I made it past the figure without them grabbing me. Maybe they wanted me to leave. Maybe they were focused on the thing in the chains. I don't know, and honestly, I don't care. All I know is that as soon as I hit the street, I jumped in my car and floored it. I didn't look back. Not once. When I got home, I locked every door and window in my apartment, turned off all the lights, and sat in the dark for hours, just trying to process what had happened. My phone kept buzzing with texts, but I didn't look at them. I couldn't. It wasn't until the sun came up that I finally worked up the courage to check. There was only one new message. It said, "You took something with you." I swear I haven't slept since. I need to start by saying I wasn't planning on writing this part so soon. Honestly, I thought I could just shove this whole experience into a dark corner of my mind and pretend it never happened. But after what happened last night, I'm realizing that I don't think this is something I can run from. So here I am, hoping that maybe telling you everything will help me figure out what the hell to do next. Let me pick up where I left off. That text, "You took something with you," has been living in my head rent-free since I saw it. At first, I didn't understand what it meant. I was pretty sure I hadn't touched anything in that warehouse. Hell, I was too terrified to even breathe wrong in there. But the more I thought about it, the more I started to feel like something was off. The first sign came the next night. I was sitting on my couch, scrolling through TikTok to distract myself, when I started hearing these weird noises coming from outside my apartment. It was faint at first, almost like scratching, and I told myself it was probably just a stray cat or something. But then it got louder. It sounded like someone, or something, was dragging their nails across the side of the building, slow and deliberate. I muted my phone and just sat there listening. The scratching moved, starting from the far side of the building and creeping closer to my living room window. My blinds were shut, but there was a tiny gap between the slats, just big enough to see out of. Against every ounce of common sense in my body, I leaned forward and peeked through the gap. The street outside was empty. completely still. But there was this shadow right at the edge of the light from the street lamp. It wasn't moving, just standing there, hunched over like it was waiting for something. I couldn't make out any details, just a silhouette. But it looked wrong, like its proportions weren't quite human. I backed away from the window and sat on the floor, my heart racing. I kept telling myself it was just my imagination, that the shadows were playing tricks on me, but deep down, I knew better. That thing, it had followed me home. I didn't sleep that night. I kept all the lights on and stayed in the middle of the room, away from the windows. Every so often I'd hear the scratching again, soft and intermittent, like it was teasing me. But when the sun finally came up, it stopped. The shadow was gone, and for a moment I thought maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. I even laughed at myself a little. I mean, who gets scared by shadows? But then I saw the marks. Right below my living room window, etched into the brick, were deep, uneven scratches. Like someone had taken a knife and dragged it across the wall over and over again. I ran my fingers over them, and they felt real enough to make my stomach drop. That's when I knew this wasn't over. The next couple of days were quiet, but not in a good way. It was that kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air itself is waiting for something to happen. I tried going about my life as normally as possible, but it was impossible to shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I left my apartment, I'd catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye. A shadow slipping around a corner, a figure standing just out of focus. But whenever I turned to look, there was nothing there. It got worse when I went to Starbucks one afternoon. I figured being around people would make me feel safer. I was wrong. I was sitting near the window scrolling through Instagram when I noticed something reflected in my screen. There was a figure standing outside across the street staring directly at me. I froze. It was too far away to see clearly, but it looked familiar. The way it stood, hunched and unnatural, was identical to the thing I'd seen in the warehouse. I tried to act normal, pretending I hadn't noticed it, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I decided to leave. I grabbed my stuff and headed for the door, keeping my eyes straight ahead, but as soon as I stepped outside, it was gone. That night, the text started again. Same unknown number. The first one said, "It's hungry." I stared at my phone, my heart pounding. Before I could even process what that meant, another message came through, "You can't keep running." And then a third, "It wants you." I didn't reply. I didn't even think about replying. Instead, I turned off my phone, threw it across the room, and sat in the corner like some kind of feral animal. My mind was racing with questions I didn't have answers to. What the hell had I brought back with me? Why was it following me? And most importantly, what did it want? That night was worse than the first. The scratching was back, louder and more aggressive this time. It wasn't just on the walls anymore, it was on my front door. I sat there in the dark, clutching a kitchen knife like that was going to do anything, and listened as it dragged its nails across the wood. And then it started whispering. I know how that sounds, but I swear on everything I'm not making this up. The voice was low and guttural, barely more than a growl, but I could make out words. My name. Over and over again, it was saying my name. I didn't open the door. I didn't even move. I just sat there, trembling, until the whispers stopped. When I finally worked up the courage to check the peephole, there was nothing there. No shadow, no scratches, nothing. But I could still feel it, like it was waiting just out of sight. The next morning, I woke up to another text. It said, "Go back to the warehouse." At first, I thought, no way in hell. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't have much of a choice. Whatever I'd unleashed wasn't going to leave me alone. And if going back to that godforsaken place was the only way to fix this, then so be it. I'm not sure when I'm going to go. Maybe tonight. Maybe tomorrow. But I'll keep you updated. If I don't post again, well, you'll know why. I didn't think I'd actually go back. Even after that last text, go back to the warehouse. I spent the whole day trying to convince myself it was some elaborate prank. Maybe one of my friends was screwing with me. Maybe I was just losing it. But the thing is, the scratches on my walls, the shadow outside Starbucks, the whispers at my door, none of my friends could pull that off. And the longer I waited, the more I felt like the air around me was closing in, like whatever I'd brought back wasn't going to let me wait much longer. By the time the sun started setting, I knew what I had to do. I packed a flashlight, a knife, yeah, like that'd help, and a portable charger. Not that I expected to be there long, I just wanted to get in, figure out what the hell was going on and get out. Simple, right? The drive back to the warehouse felt like a death march. The roads were emptier than usual, and the sky seemed darker, like the night had swallowed every bit of light. I kept glancing in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see that shadowy figure following me. But there was nothing. Just the hum of my car and the knot in my stomach growing tighter with every mile. When I finally pulled up to the warehouse, I almost turned around. It looked worse than I remembered. The faint glow from inside was still there, but now the entire building felt alive. The air around it was heavy, like it was breathing. The door hung slightly ajar, creaking softly in the wind, and I could swear I heard that same raspy breathing from the first time. But I didn't drive all the way there just to chicken out. So I took a deep breath, grabbed my flashlight and stepped inside. The smell hit me like a freight train, metallic and sour, like rust and decaying meat. The faint light from the single bulb in the middle of the room barely lit up the space, but it was enough to remind me of the chains. They were still there, bolted to the floor, but the thing that had been chained, it wasn't. The chains were broken. I froze. My flashlight trembled in my hand as I scanned the room, searching for any sign of movement. The floor was covered in scratches, deep grooves etched into the concrete, leading toward the far corner of the warehouse. And then I saw it, a dark shape, hunched over, breathing heavily. It wasn't chained anymore, but it hadn't left. It was crouched in the shadows, its back to me, its long, misshapen limbs curled around something I couldn't see. For a second I thought about turning around and running, but before I could move, it shifted. The thing turned its head toward me, and this time I got a better look at it. Its skin was even thinner than I remembered, stretched so tightly over its bones that I could see every rib. Its eyeless face seemed to twist in recognition, and it let out this low, guttural growl that made my whole body seize up. And then it spoke. At first I thought I was hearing things, but no, it was talking. The words were garbled, like it was choking on them, but they were there. It said, "Why did you bring me back?" I didn't know what to say. Hell, I didn't even know if I could say anything. My mouth was dry, and my brain was screaming at me to get the hell out of there. But then it stood up. Its movements were slow, deliberate, almost unnatural, like it wasn't used to its own body. It towered over me, its head nearly brushing the ceiling, and its mouth twisted into this grotesque grin, revealing rows of jagged, uneven teeth. It took a step forward, and I instinctively stumbled back, raising the flashlight like it was some kind of shield. That's when I noticed something even worse. It wasn't alone. Behind it, in the corner of the warehouse, was another figure, smaller, but just as horrifying. Its skin was the same pale, translucent color, and its limbs were bent at impossible angles, but it wasn't moving. It was just sitting there, motionless, staring at me with hollow, empty sockets where its eyes should have been. And then I realized it wasn't chained either. My flashlight flickered, and for a split second the entire room was plunged into darkness. When the light came back on, both figures were gone. The chains were empty, and the scratches on the floor seemed deeper, more chaotic, as if they'd been made in a frenzy. I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps, echoing from somewhere behind me. I whipped around, but there was nothing there. The air was thick, heavy, like the whole building was pressing down on me. My flashlight flickered again, and this time I heard something else. A voice, whispering. Too quiet to make out the words, but close enough to send chills down my spine. I didn't wait to find out what it was. I bolted for the door, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. As I ran, the whispers grew louder, overlapping, like a dozen voices were chasing me. They weren't coming from behind me, they were coming from everywhere. I don't even remember getting to my car. 1 second I was running, and the next I was slamming the door shut and locking it, fumbling with my keys as the whispers grew deafening. I floored it out of there, not even caring about the speed limit. All I could think about was getting as far away from that place as possible. When I finally got home, I collapsed on my couch, too exhausted to do anything but breathe. My phone buzzed, and I nearly threw it across the room. But when I finally worked up the nerve to check it, there was a new text. Same unknown number. This one said, "You let it out." I don't know what I've done, but I'm starting to think this isn't something I can fix. Whatever was in that warehouse, it's not there anymore. And I have a feeling it's not done with me yet. To be continued, if I make it that far. I'm not even sure how to begin this. If you've made it this far, I owe you the truth, but I'm warning you now, this isn't the kind of story that wraps up neatly. There's no happy ending, no catharsis. If you're reading this, know that this might be my last post. I think whatever was in that warehouse, it's here, with me. And it doesn't plan on leaving. After the last text, "You let it out," things went from bad to worse. At first, I tried to convince myself it wasn't true. I thought, maybe this is just my paranoia playing tricks on me. Maybe I'm imagining things, but I couldn't deny it for long. The signs were everywhere. It started small, shadows that didn't belong, shapes flickering in my peripheral vision. At night, my apartment didn't feel like my apartment anymore. The air was heavier, colder, and every creak of the floorboards sounded like someone, or something, was standing just outside my bedroom door. Then came the sounds. At first, it was the whispers. Faint, indistinct, like a radio tuned to static. I could hear them coming from the walls, from the vents, even from inside my closet. And no matter how loud I turned the TV or my music, they wouldn't go away. They weren't just random noises either. They were talking. They were saying my name. The first time it touched me, I thought I was dreaming. I woke up in the middle of the night to a cold, sharp sensation on my arm, like someone was dragging their nails across my skin. When I turned on the light, there was nothing there except for the scratches. 3 thin parallel lines running down my forearm. They weren't deep, but they were enough to make me nauseous. I tried to tell myself I'd done it to myself in my sleep, but deep down, I knew better. The next night, it got worse. I woke up to the sound of breathing, heavy, wet, raspy, just like the thing in the warehouse. It was so close that I could feel the warmth of it on my face. I didn't even open my eyes. I just froze, pretending to be asleep, praying that it would go away, but then I felt it. Something cold and sharp, brushing against my cheek, almost like a claw. When I finally opened my eyes, there was nothing there, just the dark. but I knew it had been real. The scratches on my arm were fresh again, deeper this time. I spent the rest of the night sitting in the corner of my bedroom with every light in the apartment turned on. The texts didn't stop either. They came at random times, always from the same unknown number. Each one was worse than the last. The first said, "It's watching you." Then, "It's waiting for you to break." And finally, "You brought it home. It's yours now." I didn't know what to do. I couldn't sleep, couldn't think. Every time I tried to leave my apartment, I felt like I was being followed. And then, a few nights ago, I woke up to find something carved into my bedroom wall. At first, I thought it was just scratches like the ones on my arm, but when I looked closer, I realized it was writing. Words scrawled in deep, jagged lines like someone had clawed them into the plaster with their bare hands. It said, "Come back." That was the breaking point. I decided I couldn't stay in my apartment anymore. I packed a bag with whatever I could carry and left. I didn't even care where I was going. I just needed to get as far away from that place as possible. I checked into a cheap motel on the edge of town, thinking I'd finally be safe. I wasn't. That night, I woke up to the sound of the motel room door creaking open. I swear I'd locked it, but when I looked, it was slightly ajar. The room was pitch black except for the faint glow of the neon motel sign outside, casting a flickering red light through the window. I reached for the bedside lamp, but before I could turn it on, I heard it. The breathing, right behind me. I froze. I didn't want to look. I couldn't. But something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe pure stupidity, made me turn my head just enough to see. It was standing in the corner of the room, the thing from the warehouse. Its eyeless face was locked on me, and its mouth was twisted into that same grotesque grin. But it wasn't alone. Behind it, barely visible in the darkness, were others. Dozens of them, all hunched and misshapen, their hollow faces staring at me in unison. I don't remember screaming, but I must have, because the next thing I knew, I was running out of the motel, barefoot and clutching my phone like it was some kind of lifeline. I didn't stop running until I was halfway down the street, gasping for air and shaking so hard I thought I might collapse. Now I'm back in my car, parked in some random lot miles away from the motel. I don't know where to go. I don't know who to talk to. All I know is that this thing, whatever it is, isn't going to stop. I think it's tied to me now like a parasite. And the worst part, I don't think it ever wanted to kill me. I think it wants something worse. My phone just buzzed again. Another text. This one says, "You can't run forever." They're right. I can't. I'm going back to the warehouse tonight. Not because I think it'll help, but because I don't think I have a choice. Whatever happens, I'll try to post an update. But if you don't hear from me, you'll know why. Wish me luck. Or don't. I think it's too late for that.